He's a tough, street-fighting lawyer with the highest ratings for honesty and integrity. He's here for you every Saturday morning to answer your legal questions and get you the help you need. You're listening to the Legal Lowdown with Birmingham's lawyer, Joe Ingram of Ingram Law, live from the studios of News Radio 105.5 WERC. Call in now, 439-9372. That's 439-9372, and ask Joe your legal question, or email the show at questions@joeingramlaw.com. Joe Ingram has more than 20 years experience fighting for his clients here in the state of Alabama. Joe's focus is criminal defense and family law. You don't have to face your legal issue alone. You've got Joe Ingram, Birmingham's lawyer, on your side. In case of sensitive legal matters, you can always reach out directly to Joe at joeingramlaw.com and arrange for a private consultation. And now, Birmingham's defender of the defenseless, protector of the people, and all-around good guy, Joe Ingram.
All right. You're listening to the live Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram, Birmingham's lawyer, the road-running street lawyer. We're back live. We welcome you to join us and listen to the show on iHeartRadio and on my podcast, The Legal Lowdown. Last week, we had some winter weather. It was touch and go up until the very last second, whether we would do it live or not. They got it right this time. The city shut down. We had to run a previous show. But we're back today. Here we are. The days are getting longer as we move towards the middle of January. And if you run in the afternoon, it's not getting dark to about 5:15. Every day we're gaining a minute. We got 6 weeks left. And we'll be back to normal daylight savings time. We want you to be a part of the show. Have a cup of coffee. Join us. We want to be a part of your Saturday morning routine. This is the Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram, just off of the UAB campus, WERC 105.5 FM. You can call us at 205-439-9372, 205-439-WERC. We had a really good week this week, as we've been teeing up and talking about. It's that time of year. And we probably had 10 new divorce cases this week, 5 new criminal cases this week. We had everything from uncontested divorces, contested divorces. We even had divorce by publications. We'll talk about those. That's where your spouse walks off and leaves you in the middle of the day, middle of the night, disappears for over a year and a day voluntarily. We can do a divorce by publication, publish it in a local newspaper for 4 consecutive weeks, get you divorced. This show is meant to be informative, educational, funny, witty, and hopefully caller-driven with your interest and local questions in mind, and we encourage callers to our show. You can also email the show, questions@joeingramlaw.com, questions@joeingramlaw.com, if you have a personal or confidential issue that you do not want to discuss on the air or radio. You are free to call us at 205-335-2640, 205-506-5590, or you can look us up at joeingramlaw.com. We will be glad to get you in, have a telephone call, have a Zoom call, or have a meeting with you to discuss your case if it's something you do not want to broadcast on live radio. This show is meant to be informational, informative, give you a voice, a chance to call in and ask your questions about anything you may have, to provide quality and valuable, informative, related to criminal law, family law issues, which we will be glad to discuss. And if I can't help you, I'll point you in the right direction with someone that I may know in my vast group of colleagues and networks that I have developed over my career. If you have any interest, comments, feedback, please call us, write in. Questions at joeingramlaw.com. The Legal Lowdown today, national news. We're going to talk about national news. Then we're going to have two guests today. We're going to have one about 6:35. If he wakes up, Al Bevel of Bevel and Associates. He is a licensed professional counselor. He does counseling for me. He does mental health evaluations, and he also does some other testing. And I think it'll be very informative for people to hear him call in. And then at 7:25, we have another guest that's going to call in, a former judge here that retired off the bench, that did divorce work, and is a full-time mediator. And it is very informative what we're going to talk about this morning. We have two great guests. The Legal Lowdown, national news today. First is the wildfires in California. There are always going to be national tragedies. There are always going to be acts of God. Government is not here to save you. Government can't fix everything. And when you live in a state such as California, where it's so left-wing, you have the ultra-rich and you have the ultra-poor. You're on your own. Divorce news this week. Jennifer Lopez, Bennifer Affleck settled their divorce case on January the 6th. No one paid spousal support, and there was also no prenup either, which is kind of unusual for people with those kinds of means. Each walked away with what they acquired during the marriage. She did get to keep a beautiful emerald ring that she acquired. Ben gets to keep his movie company with Matt Damon. They have a $61 million home. I saw a picture of this last night. It's a compound. How many people in the market for a $61 million home right now in California? Jennifer's been married 4 times. She has twins by Mark Anthony. I guess we're always looking for love, no matter how many times we try. It happens in everyone's life. By the way, Jennifer Garner came out and stated this week that Ben Affleck was the love of her life. I'm going to take a side bet in London where you can bet on anything. There may be a chance for Ben Affleck and Jennifer Garner to get back together. Jennifer and Ben have 4 lovely children. Jennifer looks like America's sweetheart, acts like America's sweetheart. Ben and Jen again. It's possible. We'll take a side bet on it. Also, Jessica Alba and Cash Warren announced that they were having a divorce split this week. No bad blood, moving forward after 20 years and 3 kids. Said they'd grown apart. Also in the news this week, criminal case, Chase Chrisley, the son of Growing Up Chrisleys, was busted in a bar fight in Atlanta, trying to pay his bar tab. He got into it with the saloon manager over a misdemeanor charge. I've seen that quite a few times in my life. Oh, TikTok. The Supreme Court announced this week, under federal legislation, TikTok is banned unless it's owned by a U.S. owner. It's supposed to go dark tomorrow night at sun night. Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary of Shark Tank. $20 billion. I'll buy it for $20 billion. I think somebody gets it tomorrow night. I wonder what the bets are this Monday morning in London. It's 12:15 p.m. in London right now. I wonder what the bets are that somebody gets TikTok. President-elect Trump weighed in yesterday thinking about doing an executive order to stop the ban on the TikTok going dark. There is a question whether an executive order would do that would override a Supreme Court decision. There is a legal precedent back to the 1930s or 40s. I think the Supreme Court wins on this one, but we'll see. I think Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary, may get it for $20 billion. Probably a steal. Also in the news this week, CNN was hit with a $5 million defamation judgment in Florida against a U.S. Navy veteran, Zachary Young. But CNN decided to settle with Zachary before the jury could decide punitive damages. Locally in the news this week, Jefferson County, there was an inmate. He held up a jailer hostage and demanded to see a judge or that he would harm the jailer. The jailer turned out to be fine. The inmate now is charged with kidnapping and menacing. The jailer was trying to deliver lunch trays and was pulled into a cell. I've been into that jail so many times. They very rarely have anything on them. It's not even a fair fight. Also locally, a man was sentenced down in Montgomery this week for delivering a bomb to the Attorney General's office, Steve Marshall. He was sentenced to 10-year state prison to run concurrently with his 9-year federal sentence. He admitted that he used nails, screws, and shrapnel and accelerants to cause an explosion. He placed stickers downtown advocating for his political agenda. Also in the news this week, locally, Katie Britt, inspired by Laken Riley Act, which would force and hold undocumented illegal aliens charged with theft, burglary, larceny, mandate that those suspects be detained until deported so they could not reoffend. Also, President-elect Trump flies out of Mar-a-Lago this morning back to Washington, D.C. We can also talk about some of the Senate hearings this last week. Pam Bondi for the Attorney General went toe-to-toe with Adam Schiff, held her on, told him on live TV, you wouldn't meet with me. Now you're here trying to attack me in front of the cameras. She did a really good job. She handled herself really well. She's going to get confirmed. Adam Schiff was censored in the well of the U.S. House of Representatives last year. Marco Rubio had his confirmation hearing for Secretary of State. He's part of the Senate. That's a no-brainer. He's going to get confirmed. That's easy. Also, Secretary of Defense. They trashed him in the news. They trashed him in the press. Former Fox host Pete Hegseth, a Harvard graduate, a Princeton graduate, also an Army officer of a field artillery unit that served in Afghanistan on the front lines. He actually asked to do that. He's going to get confirmed. He got confirmation, thumbs up, from Senator Joni Ernest, a senator of Iowa. She served 15 years in the military. And also it came out yesterday, Senator Cassidy of Louisiana gave him a thumbs up. My man, Hegseth, you're in, sir. We're still working on developing 2 segments for the show. The quick question of the week. And Joe, how do you know that? We're still working on those. Maybe we'll get those to you soon. So this is the appropriate time if you'd like to call in, 205-439-9372, 205-439-WERC, questions at joeingramlaw.com, questions at joeingramlaw.com. We can talk about criminal law cases. We can talk about family law cases. We can talk about employment law, workers' comp, car wrecks, anything that's going on in your life, we can talk about that. And that's where we're headed this morning. We handle municipal cases, which are misdemeanors, everything from DUI, possession of marijuana, domestic violence, shoplifting type cases. We handle state felony cases. We've had several of those all over the state this week, from Huntsville, Birmingham, Montgomery, Mobile. Yes, I got a new federal case yesterday in Mobile for wire fraud and money laundering. That starts this week. So if you have a state felony case, give us a call. We can help you out with that as well. We also handle a lot of sex cases. They're in the news every day. And Al Bevel, if he calls in, we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about a lot of things that we can do to help you to offset the penalties that you may be facing in those type of cases. Under divorce cases, what falls under divorce cases? We have straight up divorce, uncontested. You and your spouse agree to all issues. We prepare the paperwork. We file the paperwork. We get you divorced. Contested divorces. Those fall under the category of you're fighting over child support, child custody, who's going to get the real assets in the marriage, who's going to get alimony, spousal support, who's going to get the lake house, who's going to get the beach house, who's going to get the dog. We also been doing a lot of prenups the last couple of weeks, and we've been doing a fair number of postnups for some reason. Either way, if you have a prenup, postnup, we'll be glad to help you. If you have a modification issue, you need to take your ex-spouse back to court. You want to get custody of your child to put them in a better environment, we can help you with that as well. If you need to modify what you're getting in alimony, maybe you need to get a decrease in alimony. Maybe you got tattooed the first time around. You can't make the payments. We've helped those people in the past. We saved one gentleman money that is life transformational, generational to his family tree, that we got him back. So we can help you with those cases. You may have a PFA case. We've done several PFA cases the last couple of weeks, helping people get protection from abuse from their spouse, their ex-spouse, their boyfriend, their girlfriend, things of that nature as well. Adoption. We've had several calls for adoption the last week or two, step-parent adoption, grandparent adoptions. If you have those kind of needs, give us a call. We'll get you in. We'll talk to you about that as well. You may have a landlord-tenant case. If you have apartment issues, give us a call. We'll be glad to help you out with that as well. If you have a police brutality case, excessive force case, we've had several calls about that the last couple of weeks. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to beat the criminal case in order to prevail in a civil case. That's just food for thought. There's enough body cam, there's enough iPhone video that should help you today if that falls into your category. So that tees up some of the national news. We've talked about some of the local news. We'll be glad to discuss any of those topics with you. I can't wait to get home this morning to see Trump on the runway, to see them give him the shower over his private plane if he flies back to Washington, D.C. to be sworn in Monday morning. His inauguration will be held indoors. The first time since 1985, Ronald Reagan, 40 years ago. It was done that way because on that day it was 7 degrees. With the wind chilled, it was 40 below zero. I think Monday it's going to be in the low 20s, with the wind chill being the -1. So it's going to be held indoor for the first time in 40 years. Either way, it's the changing of the guard on the best planet on the earth. It's done the right way. One group steps aside, another group steps in. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court gives the oath of office. And then President-elect Trump, that very moment, is the president again. He's got a lot on him this time. He's also learned a lot from the first time around. We're going to see how well he achieves. He's also achieved a lot since the election, from Israel, Hamas. He's also achieved bridging the gap on undocumented aliens. I'm told Tuesday morning there's going to be a raid in Chicago, a huge raid to get people out of this country. Tuesday morning in Chicago, there will be a raid on illegal aliens. And then they're going to do them in all the major cities around the country. The Federal Reserve guy that's going to take over can only do so much. We've had 0 interest rates for a number of years during the pandemic, and then in the 2008 housing crisis. We're $40 trillion in debt. It's time to pay the fiddler. It also came out yesterday that Congress said, we're actually not a country, we're a corporation. If we're a corporation, we need somebody like Warren Buffett to step in, a money guy, a liquidation guy. Sell off the bad assets. Start selling things. Take accountability. Quit giving away free money. President-elect Trump, I saw in the news this morning, the head of the new Secret Service was the head of his private detail. Probably a smart move for him. Also, we had to bring in contractors for the inauguration. They did this under President Biden. It was $7 million. 4 years later, it's up to $8.1 million for private security for the inauguration. So at 6:28, Saturday morning, January the 18th, 2025. Yes, January the 18th, 2025. It's my mother's birthday if she lived today. God love her. Miss you, Mom. In London, it's 12:28. Paris, it's 1:28. Beijing, 8:28. Tokyo, 9:29 p.m. We'll be back after the break. Wake up, have your cup of coffee, join us. Thank you, folks. We'll be back.
You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with Birmingham's lawyer, Joe Ingram. If you need confidential legal help off air, reach out to Joe at joeingramlaw.com. Stay tuned for more. Joe will be right back after this break for news and weather on News Radio 105.5 WERC. You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with Birmingham's lawyer, Joe Ingram. Joe is a 20-year veteran of the Alabama courts, specializing in criminal defense and family law. Call in live with your questions now at 439-9372. That's 439-9372. Or write Joe with your question for the show at questions@joeingramlaw.com. If you need a private legal consultation, email Joe at joeingramlaw.com. Now, welcome back to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram.
Okay, folks. It's Saturday, January the 18th, 6:33. We're back. I hope you're having your first cup of coffee and joining us. It's a live show today. This is The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram, Birmingham's lawyer, the road running street lawyer, here for you. We have a great guest that has been so kind to join us this morning. Mr. Bevel, you there?
Good morning. How are you this morning?
Al, are you awake?
I have had my first cup of coffee, so I am awake.
Thank you, Al. Thank you for doing this.
Sure thing.
We have Al Bevel of Bevel and Associates, a licensed professional counselor off Valleydale Road in Birmingham, Alabama. Al, tell us a little bit about you and why you think we're here this morning to talk.
Well, as Joe, as you mentioned, I am a professional licensed counselor as well as a forensic counselor here in the Birmingham area. My office is on Valleydale Road, and my primary practice area. First of all, let me back up. I've been doing this for about 12 years now. Prior to that, I was in the business world for over 20 years. And people will ask, well, why the change? And I guess I say, it took 20 years for me to figure out what my passion and calling is. But that being said, it is what it is, okay? But my practice focus area is actually multifaceted. I do couples counseling into some regards, but very selective. And the couples that I like to work with are those couples that, what I call on the brink, right before they may go see Mr. Ingram here, to see if we can work through things and salvage a marriage before, the ultimate might be the divorce. The other part of my practice is, this is the crux of it in the very beginning, was what we call porn addiction and sexual addiction. And a lot of times that causes, chills up one's back or just because of the unknown of what that really, really means. And then the final part of my practice is what we call the forensic side. And a lot of that calls, what does that look like? What do you do? I like forensic files on TV and NIS or NCIS, those kinds of things. I said, well, that's not really what it is, okay? Really what it is in that area is I work with individuals that have been accused or convicted of any type of a sexual crime, primarily, and I ultimately determine what is their risk of offending or what is their risk of committing the charge that they have been charged with. The other is, what is the risk of an individual actually escalating that charge? So I started out in that area primarily doing these evaluations. And there's only 2 of us in the state of Alabama that do these. And so, as you might imagine, business has been great. But I quickly realized, I can do these evaluations, but at the end of the day, these are people. There are people that have messed up. No, I'm not condoning their behaviors or their sin or anything of what you want to term it being as, but they need help. So out of that, I formalized an intensive outpatient treatment program to work with these individuals and trying to rehabilitate them. Most of that occurs before they actually go to court. So, because we do know they're not going to get any help when it comes to this type of treatment in the Department of Corrections, especially in the state of Alabama. And the likelihood of this being addressed once they get out is pretty slim because there's no mandate, there's no law that says an individual has to go through treatment post-incarceration as part of their parole. So we try to catch them on the front end. But all of that to say, it all begins with my initial approach to all of this, and that was the porn and sex addiction world. And it kind of leads down a path, okay? And I'm not here to, in any way to talk graphic, but I am going to be talking really truthful and really real in the fact that we really have an epidemic or a tsunami, if you want to call it, ahead of us when it comes to internet pornography today. And it's got these tentacles that go out in all kinds of ways and causes people to do all kinds of things that they never, ever, ever thought that they would be doing in those moments.
Al? Al? That's what live radio is. Al? I don't know what happened to Al, but he was on a good roll there. Al's doing about 6 evaluations for me right now related to mental health treatment, to determining if someone is he back? Al? Al? Anyway, Al's doing some treatments for me, some evaluations. He does psychological evaluations to determine if they're ready to stand trial, to see if they're competent for trial. He also does an evaluation called the ABLE Sex Assessment, ABLE. It's after Dr. Abel, who was a psychiatrist in Atlanta that developed a test. Dr. Abel's no longer with us. They have monetized the Able Sex Treatment Test, like McDonald's, like a franchise. Now everybody gives it. It makes a difference at the end of the case. Sometimes it can make a difference with the prosecutor and how we deal with the case. And Al would have been perfect to talk about all of this. If, wait a minute. Al, you with us? I think Al's coming back. Al's back. Okay, here we go. That's the 641 live radio, folks. Al Bevel.
Hey, Joe. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I was talking away.
Just start where you picked off. Tell us why it's really important, Al, for what you do.
I don't know how much, again, honestly, I really don't know where I left off in that scenario, but I was ultimately talking about how all of those different areas that I've worked in, and I'm telling you, every single area, if it's marriage counseling most of the time, or the offending side of it, boils down to internet pornography. And internet pornography is truly, I feel that we're facing a true tsunami, if you want to call it that, or a true pandemic, if you want to call it that, because of the infiltration at all these different generations, and more specifically, our kids today. Our kids today, the stats show that the first exposure for an average child to view pornography is 7 years old.
Mm.
The average age of an individual becoming their first sexual experience is 11 years old. Well, people might say, well, why in the world is that? Well, we can back it up and support it by saying they're being exposed to this level of pornography at such a younger age, and now they're acting upon it, okay? And so what happens is this. For many of us, younger or older, our first exposure to pornography back in the day were magazines. And, most of the time I consider that adolescent developmentally normal. And, if you found it, probably the worst thing you had to worry about Was mama or daddy finding out you looked at it? But what we know is this. It's considered static. It only played on one sense of the body, and that was it. But with that internet, many of you guys remember, that modem making its zing-zong, whatever that noise was, and ultimately it's saying you got mail. Boy, that just sent shivers down your back because you were so close. And what we know is this, that internet, and specifically internet pornography, and to some aspects social media, it's no longer static. It's playing on multi-part senses of the body, but it's also affecting the brain, and it's hitting that dopamine receptor. It's hitting that serotonin receptor. Most importantly, dopamine gives us a high, it gives us a rush. Serotonin, it gives us this chill feel, bliss. Let me give you some quick examples of either one of those. Dopamine on the low end could be the stimulants, the Adderalls, the Vyvanses, those kinds of things. To the extreme being cocaine and meth. Serotonin examples could be like the SSRI drugs that one might take for depression and anxiety, those kinds of things. Prozac. And different types, Lexapro. But what those do, they give us a chill feel. They give us bliss. Well, what we know is this. You take a hit, and I personally have never taken a hit of cocaine myself in my life. My understanding is you take a hit of that. The first time you take it, you're going to get this exorbitant high. But over time, ain't going to be that same high. What's going to happen is you can become tolerant, use something else. And as we're seeing in today's time, sadly, people are adding things to that to get that high. They're chasing that high. Okay? It's much similar. Pornography, I'm telling you, is a very similar progression. Okay? The progression typically will look like this in the very beginning. The frequency, the number of times people look at it over a period of time. Then the amount of time, okay? Then the amount of time will go from, a couple 10 minutes to a couple minutes, all the way to 4, 5, 6 hours. I've got college kids that come into my office and said, I wasted 6 hours last night looking at this stuff when I've got a final the next morning. That's a recognizable problem at that point for them. Then the next progression is the type. And I'm not saying illegal at this point, but let me pause. Most of the time, what we know is that this usually has nothing to do with sex. It's chasing a high, okay? Before I go on, I'm failed to mention there have been clinical studies of the brain comparing pornography, internet pornography, to cocaine. And what these studies incorporated was scanning the brain through MRI. And what it came back is that they were able to correlate that both have the same effect on that brain when it comes to that dopamine receptor, cocaine and internet pornography. Again, going back, never use cocaine, but the high you get and how you have to continue to add, and then you add more or something else to achieve that high. It's exactly the same with pornography. So what is it we're having to add now to achieve the next level, what we call level 2? Well, it's the apps. It's throwing out the hook. I'm not saying that Tinder is necessarily bad, but it's the Tinder, it's the Grinders, it's all these different apps out there. And the truth of the matter is, we're going fishing. We're throwing a hook, and we're just trying to get a response. Man, we get a response, we throw it down. We are so pumped, we're so excited, and that dopamine is kicking. And, but the point is, it's never enough. It's never enough. And so what happens now? The next level is about the risk. And I tell you, the risk is what will take you down. And I tell my clients this, if you don't get a handle on it, the risk will either put you in a casket or it will end you up in Joe's office and him getting you out of jail.
Hey, Al, let me ask you a couple of questions. We only have about 9 minutes here.
Okay.
I have several cases with you. You have probably hundreds of cases. I have but 6 with you right now.
Yeah.
You also do mental evaluations to determine if somebody's competent to stand trial, and talk briefly
Right.
about that, and then talk briefly about the ABLE sex assessment test and why that's so effective and why we use it every day in these child pornography cases.
Right. Okay, I'll do that. One last thing, and then, I want to throw this out there. It's no PSA for me. I just want to say this. We're in the Bible Belt, okay? And one of the things that we know is that pornography in general has a greater infiltration in our churches today, okay? And there's been several Pew Foundation studies out there and all of that to substantiate that. I see, sadly, but on the other, when we go through this, it's actually a great thing because they can understand what true grace is, okay? But we see pastors as well, okay? But my thought is on that, real quick. It's one of Satan's greatest attacks on the church today as a whole. Because when we're in it, when we're doing it, we're making up. It's a secret. It's not hurting anybody, and it's not costing anything, which are all live from the bowels of hell, okay? That's just my approach, because at the end of the day, it can become a spiritual issue, okay? Now, let's talk about the ABLE that you brought up, Joe. There are many different evaluations and assessments that we do as a part of our total evaluation when we're evaluating somebody on that risk factor that we talked about earlier. ABLE is one of those that we incorporate. And what the ABLE does, it's an evaluation that's strictly done on the computer, and it's broken down into 3 parts. The first part, you tell us everything about yourself, from where you were born to when you lost your first tooth, blah, blah, seriously though, but your family dynamics, your understanding and healthy understanding and inner health, and kind of jaded view on sexuality, everything that comes through that, okay? And that gives us a background when we're working to, make our evaluation and our professional opinion at the end. The next one is again, it kind of reiterates, and it's a true, false, multiple choice approach, but it will ask you the full gamut, the full spectrum of any sexual thing that you may have done or may not have done. And I'll oftentimes tell my clients, just understand, you may not even know what some of this is. Don't worry about it, because that ain't meaning you, the person that does it, okay? Just let me have to hit the full spectrum. But the most interesting part of it is you can evaluate and determine where one's affinity lies sexually based off of age, gender, and race. And again, let me repeat it. It's race, gender, and age. Okay? And I will tell you, it's interesting oftentimes because, most people know, okay? Most people know, but most of the time, nobody's going to be truly honest, okay? So this is an objective measure that can help us, okay? So what is it we see today, every single day, if you're on AL.com or watching the news or listening to the news on WERC, you're hearing someone has been arrested for possession of child pornography or some sexual crime locally, statewide. I'm telling you, it's an epidemic. And so what we can do is we can evaluate that. And I can come back along with some other, evaluations and assessments that we combine together with the ABLE. And I can go and say, Your Honor, when we're in court, Your Honor, this individual is not sexually attracted to any child, any adolescent, any teenager younger than the age of 17. He or she's primary focus is an adult male or an adult female, depending upon sexual orientation. Well, it kind of puzzles the judge when we convey that. And they'll say, well, why did they do that then? Your Honor, it was about the risk. It was about the risk. It wasn't about the sex. This individual is not going to be a risk. to do anything to a child, one. Now, I'm not saying what they did in any way whatsoever was correct, right, or anything in any regard. My role, my responsibility is to help answer the question of why they did it. And bottom line is, if you can't get that question answered, then you can't help the client progress and become a better person and embrace treatment and be productive in our society.
Yeah. And Al, you have a lot of success in what you do, helping me and helping other defense lawyers, don't you, all over the state?
We have success because we are considered credible. And what I mean by that, there are sometimes some of the evaluations may not come back as positive, but we have to present that because that ultimately we are trying, just like you are, Joe, we are not only trying to protect the defendant, but we're trying to protect society. You know, so if someone comes back at a higher risk, we do not want them to be out on the roads and the streets out there unless they have some restrictions. Now, those restrictions, let me put it out this way, and you're going to think, well, they're not going to get nobody gets anything out of going to jail. They may have a jailhouse religious experience at some point, but other than that, they're going to come out lots of times, and we know this clinically, hardened at a greater risk. Now, am I trying to keep them out of jail? Yes. But am I trying to keep them from having consequences and punitive issues? No. We may employ or, suggest ankle monitors. We may suggest house arrest, but they're already kind of carrying what we call that life sentence. As an offender, you have to register.
Sex offender.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And that will never go away. Okay? So any sexual crime in the state of Alabama requires you to register as a sex offender. That means if you couldn't hold it in your car driving down the road and you got to stop off on the interstate or a side road somewhere and take a leak, somebody sees you, that's indecent exposure.
Yep.
Now you have to register as a sex offender.
Yep. It's unreal.
So keep it zipped. Bottom line.
Yeah. Al, I got about a minute left.
Yes.
Please tell
Joe.
Please tell our audience, if anybody's up having a cup of coffee, how they can find you, how they can get to you to get the help they need.
Sure. Yes, Joe. Thank you. Again, it's Al Bevel. I am with Bevel and Associates. You can find us on the web at bevelandassociates.com. Our office number is 205-610-9319. Joe, I certainly appreciate you giving me this opportunity, and I'm glad the time is kind of running out because my coffee's about to run out, and I got to get some more.
Al, thank you for doing this. This is so important. It's a big issue. It's going to be a big issue for the next 20 years in our lifetime, and you're making a difference every day, sir. Thank you.
Well, thank you, sir. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you, Al. Thank you. All right, at 6:57, we're about to go to news and weather. We'll see you at the top of the hour. We have another great guest. Join us, folks. Have a cup of coffee. This is Legal Lowdown. Joe Ingram, the Birmingham running lawyer. We'll be back.
There's another hour of the Legal Lowdown with Birmingham's lawyer, Joe Ingram, heading your way. You can ask your question live on the air at 439-9372. That's 439-9372. Or send Joe your question for air via email at questions@ingramlaw.com. If you need a private legal consultation, contact Joe directly at joeingramlaw.com. Stand by for more of the Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram right after news and weather on News Radio 105.5. WERC. He's a tough street-fighting lawyer with the highest ratings for honesty and integrity. He's here for you every Saturday morning to answer your legal questions and get you the help you need. You're listening to the Legal Lowdown with Birmingham's lawyer, Joe Ingram of Ingram Law, live from the studios of News Radio 105.5 WERC. Call in now, 439-9372. That's 439-9372, and ask Joe your legal question, or email the show at questions@joeingramlaw.com. Joe Ingram has more than 20 years experience fighting for his clients here in the state of Alabama. Joe's focus is criminal defense and family law. You don't have to face your legal issue alone. You've got Joe Ingram, Birmingham's lawyer, on your side. In case of sensitive legal matters, you can always reach out directly to Joe at joeingramlaw.com and arrange for a private consultation. And now, Birmingham's defender of the defenseless, protector of the people, and all-around good guy, Joe Ingram.
All right. We're back at 7:06, January the 18th, 2025. This is a live show. No snow, little rain. The sun's up. Daylight savings time is coming in 6 weeks. We're back. We had a really good guest, Al Bevel and Associates, talked about what he does for me criminally and also in divorce cases and why he makes a difference. It doesn't matter how you feel about the crime. It's trying to change a tsunami that's coming over the next 30 years related to child pornography, child possession, social media content, all that, folks. It is ruining our child's minds. This is a Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram, the road-running street lawyer here for you. We do a lot of divorce. We do a lot of criminal cases at 707. This is 105.5 FM WERC Talk Radio, and we have a wonderful guest now. The former judge of the Bessemer Cutoff, the Honorable Judge Eddie Vines, is with us. Judge, you with us?
Yes, sir. How you doing, Joe?
Judge, you don't say sir to me. Don't do that.
Well, you'll always be sir to me, Joe.
Well, Judge, we talked about this back in December, and I hit you up for it, and you're a man of your word. 708. It's divorce season for me, Judge. The phone's been ringing off the hook. Divorces this week.
Well, I've been told that's Class B ulcer when you got more to do than you can get done. It's Class A ulcer when you got nothing coming in.
Yeah, we talked about that last week. Yeah. But you know what time of the year it is. You know it. You've done it. You've lived it. You do a lot of mediation now. You're also in missionary work, and I want to talk about that because I want to talk about you and how much you've grown as a person and how spiritual you are and how much you do for this world in general. But let's get to the heart of the matter for the people that are listening this morning, Judge. Let's talk about mediation.
Yes, sir. Mediation, if I could just take a minute to describe the process, and we'll go a little bit deeper, but mediation is a process that comes under the heading of alternative dispute resolution. Now, that's just a big word for means ways to resolve your case outside of the court system, not going before a judge, but rather some other process. And this one is, probably the best way to resolve a case because it involves parties coming together and in a neutral venue and trying to reach an agreement on their case and get it resolved. And there's numerous benefits to it. But first of all, I'll tell you the process is that you have a neutral person in the middle called a mediator. Sometimes they're actually referred to as neutrals because they don't know either side. They don't have an interest in the case. They're not trying to help one side prevail over the other one. The mediator's goal is to try to facilitate a settlement and get the case resolved so that people don't have to go in and experience the uncertainty of a divorce trial and possibly wind up getting an order that they're not pleased with or that they didn't bargain for. Normally, mediations will take place in a neutral venue. You know, if you meet at one side of the other's lawyer's office, somebody might feel like the other one had a home field advantage and, you know, might make them a little guarded. So you try to come up with a neutral venue for them. And process is confidential. When you're talking to the mediator cannot tell your business to the other side or to anyone else. They have to keep it all confidential. And thankfully, this process does lead to an awful lot of settlements. Most cases that go to mediation do settle. So it's a good thing on a lot of different levels.
Judge, you're doing a lot of mediations in one county where we have just an unreal docket call. And you may have 3 or 4 going at the same time in those sessions. I don't know how you keep it all together. It's like a 3-ring circus show for us, for the lawyers, for the mediators. But sometimes, Judge, talk a little bit about this. I can tell my client what I think is reasonable. The other side can tell their client what they think is reasonable. Sometimes you just step in and say, look, I have no dog in the fight here, but this is what I think would happen from the bench. I've talked to people in this courtroom that's had similar circumstances or experiences, and this is how I think your issue would be decided, and I can save you litigation costs this morning. Talk about that, Judge.
Absolutely. That's one of the biggest parts of it. And I will say that docket call that you're talking about, Judge Welburn down in Shelby County is working really hard at trying to get a lot of cases settled, and she has brought back the old mediation docket. So you're right. We do have a docket where an awful lot of stuff is going on at one time, trying to get a lot of cases settled. But as far as that approach that you just said, there's a couple of different kinds of mediators. There's the one called the facilitative mediator, and that's the one that tries to help kind of coach people and encourage people and help them evaluate where they are in the process and make a deal, an agreement that kind of works for everyone on some level. Then there's the evaluative mediator, which is typically former judges, sometimes lawyers, quite often it's former judges. And now back to your question. The evaluative mediator, a lot of what they do is they try to say, look, I've evaluated both sides' position, and I think here's what's going to happen if you go to court. And if you are a former judge, you can say, this is what I probably would have done with this case. So you've got some weaknesses, you've got some risk. You might want to settle this case today rather than going to court. I'm probably a little evaluative and a little facilitative combined. But yeah, what you're referring to is what I call reading the tea leaves, helping people understand. You need to go ahead probably and think hard about settling this case, because if you go to court, you're going to expose yourself to some risk. Someone that's never met you, who is a judge, who will be trying to do the very best they can in a short time frame, is going to make some very, very important decisions about your life. But today you have the opportunity, even though you may not be getting along great with your spouse, you have the opportunity today to say, look, this is our life and our kids and our house and our equity. Let's do something that makes sense.
Yeah. Judge, what would you say is the success rate or the rate in which we are settling cases in that particular county under the new format we're using? Is it, what do you think?
Well, I think it's high. I don't know exactly the numbers. I think it's real high. Generally speaking, most cases settled. Most of all divorce cases that are filed, probably, I would guess, around 90% probably settle. And then the rest are kind of thorny, or maybe they just need a little time to work through the system and the parties to let the emotion die down a little bit or what have you. But those remaining 10% or whatever it is are the ones that take up so much of the court's time. And so I would say we're probably upwards of 90% because of that extra effort of doing the mediation docket.
Yeah. Let's talk about your private mediation work at your office. I've had a couple with you, or one or two last year. We had one that lasted almost 10 hours, Judge. I mean, we get all the way to the end, and then one little thing happens, and then everybody goes back into their fighting corners like we're in the ring, and we start all over again, and then we all end up out in the hall trying to renegotiate. Where did we go wrong? What do we fix? How do we correct all this? Talk about that.
Yeah, it is. It's very much a process, and it is really, there's no cookie cutter outcome or no cookie cutter pattern to the way these things work. I have literally had cases that we thought we were deadlocked, say at noon, but we decided to push on a little more and explore some more creative ideas, which is part of what the mediator does. That's why trained mediators, people who are experienced, who have done it a lot, can be real helpful, because you become better and better over time at brainstorming, thinking of things from different angles. And I've had cases, like I said, that we thought were deadlocked at noon, and then we were signing an agreement at 2 or 3. So there is a lot of waxing and waning and going back and forth. Of course, there's some emotions because of the nature of the case. You know, I had one fairly recently that we seemed to be deadlocked, and I just suggested that the wife take a break and go out and clear her head and walk around a little bit. And I've been doing more of that because that case did settle. I think she was just overwhelmed. She had been locked in that little room seemingly all day. And then there's other ones, hey, that people have said there's no way this is going to settle, but the judge ordered us mediation, so let's just try it so we can report to the judge that we went to mediation, and lo and behold, it got settled in short order. So it's really hard to predict how those patterns work out.
Yeah. And Judge, just briefly, you have to start with one side. You have to explain the process to them. You have to explain that you keep everything confidential unless they give you the authority to give something up to start out. And then you go to the other side. It's kind of like buying a car. About the first hour and a half, it's just really you doing both your sides with each side,
That's exactly right. And I probably spend a little more time on that part of it because, as you mentioned before, I'm also a minister. My undergraduate degree was in counseling, and I just believe that there's some catharsis value, some cathartic value in those first sessions, because if people have a pebble in their shoe or something that's really bothering them, or they feel victimized by the process or what have you, those first couple of sessions to me really set the stage and kind of till the soil for a productive mediation. So I do like to spend some time on that, and you're right, there are some things that we have to go over to help people understand the process, and then there's some ethical requirements for mediators to make sure people understand certain things.
Yeah. And I'd like to say, by the way, just because I know you and I use you, you're very reasonable in your rates in private mediation.
Well, I appreciate that, and I try to stay reasonable for a number of reasons. First of all, I enjoy doing it. You want to encourage the type of work that you like doing. So, if you can make it affordable for people, then, hopefully you're going to get more of it. But secondly, I've kind of developed a niche within what I call the working middle class. I typically have lawyers that use me that have folks that are, maybe welders or possibly, work in an administrative office or something like that. And they don't typically have just lots of money laying around. So it helps to get them into this process that I believe is helpful for everyone. And first thing I try to do, and it usually goes nowhere, but I try to mention reconciliation to people at the outset. And I've had one or two actually reconcile at mediations. It doesn't happen often, but, once again, I like to encourage people to use me, and we do it at least briefly explore the possibility of reconciliation.
Judge, when you say that, I'm sorry, Judge. Don't get mad at me. It reminds me of Judge Roy Moore one time. I had a divorce case. He didn't take the lawyers in the chambers. He took the parties in his chambers. And honest to goodness, told them, you're not getting a divorce. I believe in God. You're going to go home and save your marriage. And me and the other lawyer looked at each other like, what are you doing? This is unethical. It happened, Judge. I'm not making it up.
Well, in Alabama, if you want a divorce, you can pretty much get a divorce, and there's really no stopping it. So, the way I see it, once the process gets to me, usually people are so far from reconciling that it's not even funny, but I believe we have the opportunity at that point to make peace.
Yeah.
And peace is a good thing for a lot of reasons, but if you've got kids, it's particularly good because, a lot of these folks, they've got to co-parent until the child or the children are 19, whether they like it or not. So I like to think in terms of at the mediation, encouraging people not just to settle their case, but to work with each other and listen to each other, that type of thing, because just because it's good for them and good for the world in general. But no, I don't think you can. I don't think you can tell somebody, "I'm not going to divorce you," and then that be the end of it. There's going to be a way to get a divorce in Alabama. Pretty much every other state, I think.
We're speaking with the Honorable Judge Eddie Vines, that's been so kind to call in at 7:22 on a Saturday morning and talk with me. Judge, I've had this happen in the last couple cases, and the last mediation I had with you, I know you don't remember this because you do so many, and judges, you see so much that all runs together. The pets, Judge. The pets are becoming the biggest issue. Who's going to get the dog? Who's going to feed the dog?
It is definitely becoming a bigger issue, and sometimes it almost is the hill people are willing to die on, because and it's funny, Joe. A lot of times, the fight over the dog or what have you will happen, and one side will say, "Well, he didn't even like that dog." It's just kind of become a grudge match, so to speak, over the animal. But you're right; it's a bigger and bigger deal. Don't really know what's driving that, other than just maybe a general warming to having animals, having pets. Maybe there's more pet ownership now than there used to be. I don't know, but you're right. It is something I've noticed.
Yeah. I've had that in several here lately. Judge, at 7:23, we take a break about 7:28. I wanted you to talk a little bit about you personally, professionally, about your missionary work, because you have grown so much. And I have so much respect for you, Judge.
Well, thank you for saying that, Joe. I appreciate it, and the feeling's mutual. When I was toward the end of my tenure serving in Bessemer here in divorce cases, in the it was around 2015, I began to feel led into the ministry. And we Baptists, you get hit with lightning bolt and you say, okay, I'm being called to the ministry. That's kind of the whole process right there. But I went to seminary, distance learning through the New Orleans Baptist Seminary, and studied Christian apologetics and got a master's degree in that, and started a little ministry. I decided to not run again for office. Started a little ministry, and we do a number of things, but what you're referring to mainly is we ended up starting an orphanage in India up in the Northeast with people called the Naga tribes. and they have a lot of orphans because there's a lot of needle sharing, drug use, HIV, people dying young, and then there's orphans everywhere. So we started that, and it has been very, very, very rewarding. And it's just been a true blessing to me to have these kids that we're responsible for. And we've got a small one, so we know the kids, we know their grades, and all the small details of their lives. And it's something that I have been able to fund with doing the mediations, and I do a little chaplain work for a company in Birmingham part-time. So I have been able to fund these things, and like I say, the mediations are good. It's a good practice. I get to have social time, so to speak, with members of the bar because I see them, on a pretty regular basis. And because most cases settle, you get to leave at the end of the day feeling like you've helped make peace, and you've helped, I sometimes say, airlift them out of the litigation process. Because if they go to trial and they've got kids and they're angry at each other, there's not going to be any good thing that's going to come out of that. It's only going to be worse. But yeah, we have the ministry over there. We're expanding to help a community of widows, and it's just good stuff all around, Joe. I'm tremendously blessed. I couldn't be happier in this chapter of my life than I am. Everything is just going great.
Judge, the last thing I think is really important that we didn't touch on. When we do mediations, the people actually have a say, and they actually have a kind of control over how the outcome of their case is, as opposed to rolling the dice in litigation and not necessarily knowing how it's going to come out. I mean, you actually kind of control your destiny in a way.
I'm so glad you circled back around to that. That's probably the biggest reason I said 90% of the cases settle. That's probably the biggest reason right there, at least the ones that go to mediation. There's this factor of the unknown. Divorce judges in Alabama, divorce cases are not jury trials. You don't have a jury of your peers that you can appeal to. You have one person. And once again, like I said, I think the judges that I know do as good as they can do with the time and the resources that they have, but you are laying it out there on the line for a stranger, an agent of the state. We think it's normal. We've gotten to where we think it's normal for the government to tell us what to do with our kids and our property and all, but it really is abnormal. That's decisions that parents should be making. And we stress at mediation, if you put this in front of a judge, you may wind up with a result that you weren't expecting that could be very far from something you think you could live with. And there's not a lot of recourse. You can appeal cases, divorce cases in Alabama, but the chances of being overturned are extremely small.
Slim to none.
Oh, yeah. And I tell people, I use actual numbers. You've been married 22 years. Well, guess what? Someone that you don't know is going to take 4 hours and try to figure out what happened in your 22 years and do the right thing as they see it.
Judge, we got to go. This is the Honorable Judge Eddie Vines. Judge, thank you for calling in. Judge, I don't want to take up even more of your time. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good week. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Judge. Bye-bye.
You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with Birmingham's lawyer, Joe Ingram. If you need confidential legal help off air, reach out to Joe at joeingramlaw.com. Stay tuned for more. Joe will be right back after this break for news and weather on News Radio 105.5 WERC. Lowdown with Birmingham's lawyer, Joe Ingram. Joe is a 20-year veteran of the Alabama courts, specializing in criminal defense and family law. Call in live with your questions now at 439-9372. That's 439-9372. Or write Joe with your question for the show at questions@joeingramlaw.com. If you need a private legal consultation, email Joe at joeingramlaw.com. Now, welcome back to the Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram.
Okay, we're back. It's 7:33, January the 18th, 2025. We're live. In London, it's 1:34 if you're taking bets on TikTok. We talked about the national stories this week on the Legal Lowdown, the wildfires in California. We talked about Jennifer Lopez, Ben Affleck, divorce, their house. They didn't have a prenup. Their house that's going to go on the market, $61 million. He gets to keep his movie company with Matt Damon. And Jennifer Garner stated, Ben was the love of my life. The bets in London are going up, folks. Buy me cheap this morning. Ben and Jen will get back together in 26. We also talked about Jessica Alba and her husband getting a divorce after 20 years, 3 children. We also talked about local news. We also talked about some local legal issues. TikTok, Mr. Wonderful, Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary, $20 billion. By Sunday at dark, the Supreme Court says we're turning it off. I have made bets that a deal happens. Somebody takes it. President-elect Trump has weighed in, said he wants a deal. We need to keep it. He's even made an appeal, had his legal advisors look at the issue. There's some precedent back to the 1930s or 40s. Does a presidential executive order override a Supreme Court decision? I don't think it does. I don't think we're going to have to get there. Somebody's going to own TikTok tomorrow by maybe 8 o'clock Eastern. Maybe. We talked about the Chrisley young man, growing up Chrisley, getting in the bar fight, not paying his tab, getting in the fight with the saloon owner. We talked about the inmate in the Jefferson County Jail. Took one of the deputy sheriffs that run the jail hostage this last week. Now he's charged with kidnapping. And we talked about divorce cases. We do a lot of divorce cases, overrun with divorce cases this week, divorce by publication. You can call us 205-439-9372, 205-439-WERC 105.5 FM Talk Radio. You can call my office 205-335-2640, 205-506-5590 if you have a question that you do not want to talk on the air about that's confidential. If you have any legal issue, please give us a call. We had a question come in about divorce. What do I need to bring in to draft my paperwork? Good question. Get it all the time. First, we need the basics. Names, dates, places. Your full name, the wife's full name, her maiden name, date of birth, preferably Social Security numbers, child's names, date of birth, where you got married, city, county, and state, the date you got married. It is sad how many people that come in for divorce. What date did you get married? I can't remember. That might be why you're getting a divorce. You don't even remember the day you got married. What day did you separate? Oh, I know that day. I left him this day. You remember that day. That's an easy number to remember. And then we need the particulars. How we're going to divide property. Cars, houses, furniture, personal belongings, monies, IRAs, retirement accounts, alimony. Child support is determined by the guidelines unless you agree to something outside of the guidelines. Who's going to carry health insurance for the children? How are we going to decide custody? Visitation. We talked about visitation during the holidays. Also, coming up just around the corner is spring break. Everybody will wait till about the second week in February, and then they say, we have an issue about spring break again this year. It happens. It happens every year. We also talked about if you have a criminal case. We've had several criminal cases this week. I just got a new federal case down in Mobile for wire fraud and money laundering that we start this week. And then we've had really good guests today. Al Bevel, Bevel and Associates off of Elledale Road. You can look him up on the internet. He is a licensed professional counselor. He does counseling with people that are on the brink of divorce. He tries to help save it. He also does criminal work for criminal lawyers. I have 6 cases with him right now. We have an epidemic, folks, in society related to the internet and social media. People think they're hiding behind a screen. It's poisoning their mind. It's poisoning how they see society. It's not healthy what you see on the internet, what happens in real life, in homes and in relationships. He does psychological evaluations to determine if my clients are competent to stand trial, to see if they have PTSD from maybe being in Afghanistan, Iraq. They have some issues that make them not able to make really good, competent decisions to stand trial. They also do the ABLE, ABLE, sex battery exam. It was developed out of a psychiatrist, Dr. Abel, in Atlanta, Georgia, that passed away. The ABLE test has been franchised. Everybody claims they can do it now. But there's a skill to it. There's an art to it. Supposedly, you can't beat the test. It tells us whether you did it out of curiosity, whether you have a tendency to do it, or whether you're a sex predator looking at it. And all that makes a difference between jail time, getting counseling, or whether you're going to end up having to register as a sex offender the rest of your life. There's 2 things on this earth that follow you: being a murderer and a registered sex offender. It's going to determine where you live, if you ever work, everything about your life about being a sex offender. I'm not condoning it. It's just where we are. And those are the kind of topics we talked about today. And it's 7:42. In about 22 minutes, I'm headed to Jemison Trail to get on the road to do my road running today. I don't think it's raining outside. There's a 30% chance of rain, but I'm going to get my 8 to 10 miles in this morning. I just had another question come in. What is a prenup? A prenup is used by a lot of people now, not just in second marriages, but also in first marriages. A lot of people are getting married later. They come in with professional degrees, portfolios of real estate. One client has cryptocurrency. Crypto hit 105,000 a Bitcoin this week. 105,000 for one Bitcoin. When he told me what he paid for it, it's almost nauseating. I also can't watch the crypto market because I don't have the stamina for that. Up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. It's a pyramid scheme. Some people invest in that. I'm a little bit more conservative in my investments, although with President-elect Trump today, I did put a bunch of new money in my Vanguard account this week, and I think I'm going to be okay here the next 4 years in a good way. So if you have a crypto case, give us a call. Most of the judges do not understand the technology behind it, how you transfer it. It's a skill. And not a lot of people are talking about that. We also talked about the case with Katie Britt, the Lincoln Riley Act, why that's so important for that young lady that was killed by an illegal alien. If they're charged with a crime, burglary, rape, larceny, they're not going to be just deported. They're going to be held accountable for their actions in this world. We also talked a lot about the last couple of weeks, the Alabama Child Protection Act. And there was a federal legislation that came out by Senator Ted Cruz during the holidays. That young lady out of Texas took a lot of guts, a lot of compassion to talk about what happened to her in high school and the need to protect the innocent, the victims, that their faces are used and then it's turned around and their life is ruined in their high school by their friends, by the people they know and trust, and they're stigmatized. People have seen these images of me. It may be true. It may be an altered image by AI. Does she leave the school? Did she walk down the hall? Take a lot of guts to do that. So all those issues are important. If you're a victim of the Alabama Child Protection Act, please call me. There's a lot of litigation that is fixing to happen with those cases. And if you're charged with those, you better give me a call, because now if you're a minor, those aren't juvenile cases. They're state felony cases, and you're looking at real time up to a Class A felony. If you publish it, you're publishing child pornography. That's the biggest issues coming the next 5 years, and why we're talking about these cases right now. And somebody that called in sent me a question. How long does it take to get an uncontested divorce? Usually, generally, the rule of thumb is if you file for an uncontested divorce, if I file the papers Tuesday after a federal holiday, if everything's filed correctly, properly, dotted all our I's, dotted all our T's, did all the paperwork right, generally the judges are pretty good about signing divorce decrees in 30 days. And as I told you, I have a lot of people telling me, Joe, I'm going to file next month as soon as I get my tax return. Well, you can't file usually to about February the 1st when you get your W-2 or your 1099. So we have divorces lined up now to almost March, just booked, waiting to file. That's the time of year it is. I'm not proud of it. I'm just telling you life where we are. We also do a lot of divorce by publications. We've done a couple of those this week. People think they have no recourse. Well, when did they leave? 2 years ago. Where'd they go? I have no idea. I haven't seen them. I haven't heard from them. They ghosted me. I don't even know if they're on social media. We can do a divorce by publication and get you divorced so that you can move on with your life and find your next soulmate, because everybody is looking for somebody to share their life with. Somebody just sent a question in. We get this a lot in municipal court. What's the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony? Misdemeanors carry up to 1 year in the city jail or the county jail. 1 year. They don't have the same implications as a felony. You can have a misdemeanor for domestic violence, for a DUI. You can have a misdemeanor for possession of marijuana second, for shoplifting. Yep, I was at Lowe's the other day. Nobody wanted to help me. I didn't know how to use the scanner. The guy said, just walk on out. I said, no, sir, no way. I said, somebody's going to help me do this scanner, and you're going to read my ticket because I'm looking at myself on the camera, and I want to make sure I don't get charged with shoplifting in 30 days when I walk out the door. Please look at this. Felonies in Alabama are more serious and can prevent you from getting jobs. We have Class A felonies, which are 10 to 99 years. Those are rape, robbery, murder, sex crimes, the worst crimes. Then we have Class B felonies, which are burglaries, theft of properties, some sex cases. Those are generally 2 to 20 years in the state penitentiary. Then we have Class C felonies, which are drug crimes. Low-level burglary crimes, burglary tools. We also have Class D felony now related to some drug cases. DV2, domestic violence second, strangulation, that's a Class B felony. That's a serious charge. And if they have the goods on you, they're not going to dismiss those cases. You're going to either have to plead down to a DV3 or some other course and do anger management or some kind of court-ordered work to move on with your life. And if you don't think that'll wreck getting a job, fill out that job application and see if they run a background test check on you and see if you get an employment. So we've had a really good show today at 7:50. This is the Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram, Birmingham's lawyer, the road running street lawyer, here for you. 205-439-9372, 205-439-WERC, questions at joeingramlaw.com, questions at joeingramlaw.com. We also have had a lot of expungements this week. Expungements are great. I'm glad we're doing it. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a filing fee for an expungement. That does not include the attorney fee. I've had several people call me this week and say, will you do it for X? Yes, I will, but you're going to have to pay the filing fee. I also have to pay to serve 4 entities, the court, the prosecutor, where you got arrested. I have to serve all those people. I can't do it personally. A third party has to do it. My process server has to do it. And just a plug, Spy for Rent, thank you. You've done a lot of work for me this week. You're first class. Spy for Rent, if you need a private investigator, call Spy for Rent. Jeff Hammock or Corey do wonderful work. Spy for Rent. They have been professional in everything that they've done for me since we started our relationship. Spy for Rent. Spy for Rent. So at 7:52, I got 8 minutes, get on the road, get my 8 miles in. Next week, we'll be back. We'll have another live show. We got some good guests coming every week. Every week, we have great guests coming. Please tune in, download the podcast, share, send, like, send to anybody, everybody on your social media to grow this show in the metrics. The metrics are moving in the right way, positively. This is our 4th live show out of 6 weeks. And weather preventing, we're getting to the end of that nonsense now. We're getting back to daylight savings time. Now to Memorial Day, we're going to have great guests every week for the things that you want to talk about and need to talk about. If you have a divorce case, criminal case, car wreck case, worker comp case, employment case, breach of contract case, call us. If I can't help you, I can point you in the right direction to get you the person you need and the help that you need with your legal case. Everybody decided to go back to work this week. The phones rang off the hook one day. At one point in time, we had 7 phone lines ringing, and we couldn't even answer the calls. That Judge Vines, he said, Joe, that's a Class B problem to have. Yes, it is, Judge. It's also a little scary for everybody when the phones are ringing off the hook. But we're here, and I'm glad to have that. I'm very fortunate to get to do this and to get to be a part of your Saturday morning and get to know you, and you get to know us and have a cup of coffee and talk about these issues and why they're so important. And now we're going to talk about the final word of the week of the Legal Lowdown. Great life is built not by revolution. A great life is built by evolution. Small and steady wins the race. What you do every day is far more important than what you do once every decade. I want you really to think about that idea. What you do every day is simply your life in a miniature. And as you live your life every single day, so you're crafting your life. What you're going to do over the next hours is really building your future. And if you can't just get every single pocket of 24 hours right, as best as we humanly can, the rest of our life is going to take care of itself. So small wins matter. According to Joel Osteen, which I love to listen to, this is one of his sermons. The scripture says, we will eat the fruit of our words. You are planting seeds. When you talk at some point, you're going to eat that fruit. My challenge is to make sure you're planting the right kind of seeds. You want apples. You want to sow apple seeds. If you want oranges, you can't plant cactus seeds, poison ivy seeds, mushroom seeds. You're going to reap fruit from the exact seeds that you've been selling. In other words, you can't talk negative and expect to live a positive life. You can't defeat and expect to have. You can't talk lack of things and not enough, can't afford if it never get ahead. And you can't expect to have abundance if you have a poor mouth, and you're going to have a poor life. And if you don't like what you're seeing, start sowing different seeds. You may not realize it, but we're always feeding ourselves what we want to listen to the people we're around, the thoughts we're dwelling, that's feeding our inner man. If you go to lunch with people that talk bad about the boss, fun of the coworker, put down a friend, and they're feeding you gossip, feeding you jealousy, feeding you disrespect, here's the key. Whatever you feed is going to grow. Folks, we're almost done. If you hear gossip, you're going to tell gossip. The last thing I'd like to tell you today, I will never get well. I'll never meet the right person. You're feeding mediocrity, feeding fear. If you know exactly what you want to be, you need to spend as much time with people that are actually already well. Have a good week. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Don't forget to
Have a good
follow
week.
Joe's Legal Lowdown podcast on iHeart. If you need a private legal consultation, reach out to Joe on his website, joeingramlaw.com. Tune in again next Saturday at 6 a.m. for the Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram, exclusively on News Radio 105.5 WERC. No representation is made that the quality of legal services to be performed is greater than the quality of legal services performed by any other lawyer.